welcome back. We have finally made it to block number 10 of our dog park and alley cat challenge. I have our kit here on the table for both the dog park and the alley cat. I have ironed my background fabric for both of these because I cut them quite a while ago, and I want to make sure that we get all the little micro pleats and wrinkles out of those so that when we put our applique on there, we know they're going to be nice and crisp. I have our color covers here laid out, so the next thing I need to do is move some of this superfluous stuff off of the ironing table and get my light box over here so we can go ahead and proceed to block number 10 of our dog park versus alley cat challenge. Well, today I have both of my blocks set up. They are the last blocks in this series, block number 10. I have my dog park on this side, alley cat on this side. Again, I'm using the same background fabric. This particular one was meant to resemble yarn that had been tumbled all over the house by the cat. And in this particular case, I used a newsprint. The newsprint was meant to representing the potty training on a dog. I have the components laid out for both just about where they go, and I like to do that just to make sure that all the pieces are in place, but also just to make it a little bit easier as I'm going through the assembly process. And I'm going to do both of these not really simultaneously, but I'm going to be doing them both at the same time where the components for each one are. I'm going to do the neck first, then I'm going to do the ears, because the ears always go underneath the head just a little bit. And this is I think a fairly simple one, so this shouldn't be too long to get this completed. Of course, the longest part for me is always the cat's whiskers and freckles, if freckles is indeed the correct terminology for those little dots. Now I'll do the dog's ears. Of course, the dog is simplified also because he doesn't have inner ear in this particular month. I thought I had the ears on the right side, but clearly I did not. And now I can move on to the head. If I go ahead and finish the head out for the dog, that's just about completes him out. Sometimes if you have a hard time seeing underneath the darker fabric, even with the light box, you can just get a pretty good estimation from where there isn't really anything underneath it, just from the edges, to get really good placement on something. And I put my eyes on my dog and he's finished. Seems like dogs are always finished with their business faster than a cat is. Always have fun with the placement of the pupil of the eye, because that's really where you get the interesting expressions from these animals. You can make them cross-eyed, staring off into the distance. And just like that, the dog is finished. Now we'll move on to get back to the Applique. You can see the rounded part goes up. And I'm just going to take this inner ear and just slightly stick it under there. There, I like that better. Now I can do the muzzle. Colorful nose. You also can see just by the placement of that nose, you can get a little bit of an expression going there by tilting that nose slightly to the left or the right. There's always a larger white of the eye. One's larger than the other. And you can also see that the eye pupil is a little bit larger than the freckles. So you have to keep track of that. Then we're down to the whiskers. We may get to the finish line just by a whisker to see who's going to finish first. Alley cat or dog park? Who is your favorite? I'm also interested to hear what some of you think about a good panto design for the quilting on both the dog park and alley cat. I was kind of thinking about malachite for dog park, but I'd be interested to hear what you say. Also, I haven't seen any pictures of anybody else's background fabric or any other creative ideas that they might be using these for. All of these blocks would be really cute for the back of a backpack, a music bag, a tote bag to take to your guild meetings. Could be cute sleeper pillowcases for when your kids do sleepovers. You could put them on just some kind of a board like we've done here, just as wall decor. Those I just got at the local DIY craft store. They're just blank boards framed, and then I whitewash that with a diluted white household paint and then let it dry, and then I went ahead and fused the applique right on there. These appliques, pre-fused applique, will fuse onto glass, wood, metal, anything that you could put an iron on, or you could fuse it using a blow dryer and just a spritz bottle. As long as you activate that fusible web, and then you could hold the applique in place with like a tea towel until it has a chance to cool down a little bit to get that pressure component. That's what we did here on the glass. We put our funky chicken on a big glass jar, and I have a kitchen full of those glass jars. I use them to hold my flour, sugar, powdered sugar, brown sugar, oatmeal. I've got a kitchen full of those. get right down to the finish line, and it will be a little circle that slows me down. Every month these guys get me. They're hard for me to hold. If anything is going to have a problem with the fusible, it's going to be these little guys, because it just takes a little bit longer for that heat to penetrate through the ultra suede and get back to the back of that fusible. So if any of them are going to be a problem, it's going to be these little dots. And success. The last freckle of the last block of the two competing teams, Dog Park and Applique. We're going to go ahead and get this light box out of the way, and we'll fuse these two in place, and this will be history. We've moved the light box out of the way. I have my Teflon pressing sheet both underneath the blocks. I'm also going to lay it on top after I spritz it. I always like to spritz the top of the applique with a spritz bottle because I don't keep water in my iron. If I don't keep water in the iron, it cannot leak. So I'm just going to go ahead and spritz the fabric because Steam Seam 2, as the name implies, does require steam to activate that fusible web. I will go ahead and lay the Teflon pressing sheet over top, but I want to just double check my ultra suede, especially because if anything shifts, it would be those. So I get those in place, and then I can just go ahead and place my iron on there, count to 10 or 12. You would have to test the time for your own iron because each iron is going to heat at a different temperature and a different intensity. So I also just like to add a second or two when I'm using a Teflon pressing sheet for that heat to penetrate through the Teflon pressing sheet into the fusible. Also, in areas where you have compound layers like the eye, the iris, the head, the background fabric, it's going to take a while for the iron to work its heat through all of those layers. So when you have compound pieces like that, you need to accommodate that by leaving the iron on just a little bit longer. The Teflon pressing sheet is also going to give you a little bit of insurance when you're using your iron so that you don't scorch the fabric. You're not going to be able to overfuse the Steam Seam 2, but you could overheat the fabric and scorch that, and the Teflon pressing sheet will help you prevent that. Another reason why I like to use the Teflon pressing sheet is because, especially with the ultra suede, they're dimensional and they're raised up off of the fabric. And sometimes I get lazy and I just push the iron from side to side rather than lifting the iron up as I should when I relocate it. And I have in the past scrunched the edge of one of our applique edges and then fused it in place, and then I beat myself up afterwards and I'm miserable with myself. So I use the Teflon pressing sheet to protect the fabric, to protect the edges, and just to give it a nice, clean, finished look when it's all done. It just covers a lot of sins. It's a one-time purchase. I got this really large one from Laura Heine's website because she does a lot of work with the Steam Seam 2 also, and she carries this really large size, which I happen to like. I also happen to like Laura Heine. I love her work. So after I get this completely fused, and I did a pretty heavy misting on that, and the fabric is dry, so I'm pretty sure that in that process we fused it. But I always like to flip the blocks over. I'm going to get rid of this stray thread, and I'll go ahead and spritz it again from the back, just to make sure that we really did get these pieces fused. Certainly if I can get the back of those ultra suede pieces, I'd like to do that, because those are the tricksters. Now I don't necessarily have to use the pressing sheet for the back, but since I have it here, I'm going to go ahead and do it. I don't know, maybe it traps the heat in between the two layers and helps it fuse better. That's my story. I'm going to go with it. And once we get these two blocks finished, our next video will be assembling the quilt, and in my case I'm going to be assembling both. I haven't picked out my sashing fabric yet, so between now and then I will have picked out sashing fabric, but it very well may be white, Kona white, just the way we did in the pattern. But I do have fabric picked out for the outside edge for both of these two block of the months. In the case of the Applique, I found this same exact fabric that I used for the background, but instead of blue squiggly lines, it has black squiggly lines. And I like the little bit of contrast that that's going to add to finish out the edge. And on the dog park, I think I have also a variation of the background fabric that I used, which was a newsprint. I have an additional newsprint fabric that I think was just a little bit darker than this one, and I thought that would also frame the fabric well. So if you join us next time, we will have the assembling, and then we'll actually get to quilting these. So I am looking forward to hearing some of your suggestions for quilting pantos from Urban Elements for finishing these off. And I think that's going to do it. We have our final blocks, block 10 for both the dog park and Applique finished. And the next step is really getting these blocks all together. As you can see, I have some of the blocks spread out here. I've got more of them upstairs. I will have to make sure that I press each of these because they've been sitting around waiting for us to finish. And here we have all of our blocks finished. It looks kind of like I'm running some kind of veterinary clinic or puppy mill or something. I've got so many dogs and cats piling up all over the place. So it's time we wrangle them all together. And I think you know what it's like to wrangle a herd of cats. So getting all of these cats together in one quilt is going to be a feat, a miracle if I can get it that far. So join us next time. We'll be putting all of these blocks together into two separate quilts, and hopefully after that we'll make it on to actually getting these quilted. So thanks for stopping in today, and we'll see you again soon. And that